Hello, and welcome to another episode of AI in the Classroom Daily, a podcast helping educators make sense of AI without the hype. I'm Dan Cogan-Drew, co-founder, chief academic officer here at Newsella, and I use AI as a thinking partner in preparing each of these episodes because I think the best way to talk honestly about AI in education is to work with it openly. So since GPT launched in 2023, teachers have started building their own AI policies. They haven't been waiting for their district and they haven't been following a mandate. They're basically just sitting down and thinking through, what do we actually need to have happen here? I looked at several of these recently across different grade levels, different contexts, different teachers. And I noticed that they're all saying something important about where educators are right now with AI. Not what you'd expect if you only read the headlines about AI in schools. So 2 years ago, the conversation was effectively, how do we stop students from cheating with AI? In some places, that conversation has persisted. But if you read what teachers are actually building in their own classrooms, I think the conversation has started to shift. It's not how do we prevent this anymore, it's how do we get honest about this and keep learning intact. It's a bigger shift than it sounds. I think the older thinking implied by a lot of the school policies goes something like student use of AI is the problem, we need rules to stop them. The move is very restrictive, and the policies that are created often say what students cannot do in the hope that that's going to create compliance so that everyone can move on. The new thinking in these classroom policies is a bit different. It's AI is present, it's here, students are capable of reasoning, and we need to create a space where we can be transparent about use and actually teach about it. One teacher I looked at, Eric Cross, put it directly. He said, it's hard to learn about behavior when we push it into hiding. I think that sentence says everything. A conversation I had recently with Carl Johnson, who's the Associate Director for Accreditation and School Improvement at the NEASC, the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, was talking about something similar in his travels and conversations with school administrators, is that it sounds like there's a lot of denial going on, where students expect that a lot of the materials that they're consuming in their classrooms are AI created. Teachers expect that a lot of the student work that they're seeing is also AI created, but they're almost talking past each other. That conversation got to be so interesting, we're going to do a follow-up interview with Carl, so look for that coming soon. So when Eric Cross says it's hard to learn about behavior when we're pushing it into hiding, it's not that Cross is trying to stop students from using AI. It's that he's trying to make the use visible so he can actually understand what's happening and respond to it. And I think that's what's different in this approach. So when you look across the number of policies that I reviewed, there are several things that showed up over and over. First was that there was an emphasis on transparency over restriction. Policies from people like Eric Cross, Stacy Kratochvil, Brett Volgensinger, and Mark Watkins. All these teachers are designing policies around disclosure instead of bans. They're not saying no AI. They're saying, let's name it, document how you used it, and tell me why. I think what's revealing about these choices is that the teachers have accepted something. Hiding the rule doesn't stop the behavior. Students are going to find workarounds, as they have been in any case. And transparency is designed to do something different, which is to create a record. It creates an opening for a conversation, and that gives everyone a chance to reason together instead of just enforce or defy. Second, there's student voice in the design. Sydney Beachboard, Stacy Kratochvil, Second Sharkey, they didn't write these policies alone and then hand them down. They involved students in building them. It wasn't a case of handing the rules over. It was more like, here's what we care about, learning integrity and growth. What should we do about AI? And students help create the policy. They value it differently. That compliance comes from buy-in, and it looks very different than compliance that comes from authority. And these teachers seem to understand that difference. Third, there's nuance instead of binary. Brett Volgensinger built a transparency survey that doesn't ask, did you use AI? It offers a spectrum. Students can say, I got feedback from another person. I used embedded tools like Microsoft Editor. I used AI tools in some parts of my process. Or I didn't use AI at all. It's not a yes or no question. It's more of a spectrum. And that spectrum is a better reflection of reality because AI isn't just one thing. It's not monolithic. It's a whole range of choices. Some of them are fine, some of them are not. And treating it as binary, yes or no, is going to miss the actual thinking that students are doing, which is really the whole point of the policy. Fourth, there's explicit teaching and not assumptions. Multiple teachers, Volgensinger especially, built in an explicit lesson called Is It Cheating?, where students look at different AI prompts and outputs and decide, does this push my thinking or replace it? Is this crossing a boundary or not? Cogan-Drew said something I found striking, which is students know when interactions cross boundaries and they can articulate why. He doesn't assume that students understand the difference between using AI for support and using it to skip the thinking. He's teaching that, and he finds that students can reason through it. I think what's most revealing here is that there is an explicit assertion of trust. Teachers are not assuming that students will cheat if given the chance. They're assuming students can learn to think through ethical questions if given the tools. Fifth, it's ongoing. It's not one time. Beachboard, Kratochvil, Bolgensinger, they all emphasize that these policies aren't set in stone. They're revisiting them. They evolve them as the year goes on, as new tools emerge, as students' questions change. This isn't a problem to solve once and be done. It's a condition to navigate, and the navigation continues to change and update with new developments. Sixth, teachers are modeling. Mart Watkins includes his own AI use in his syllabus. Brent Volgensinger puts AI transparency statements on articles that he publishes. These teachers aren't making rules for students and then exempting themselves from these rules. They're practicing what they're asking their students to do. And I think that matters because these policies only work if teachers are willing to live up to them too. It's not do as I say, it's that we're going to do this together. So when you step back and look at all this together, what do these policies tell us about where teachers actually are with AI? First, teachers have moved past the panic. The early anxiety was, will students cheat? These policies are showing us that teachers have accepted an uncomfortable answer, which is that some will, but the question isn't how to prevent it, it's how to be honest about it and work with it instead of pretending you could stop it completely. Second, teachers trust students more than policymakers do. A lot of district AI policies are written from fear. They're generic and compliance focused. This was a common theme in the conversation that we had with a group of New Jersey administrators and educators this past June, when they were signaling a lot of concern about the presumption that they saw the policies making about where students were coming from and breaking a lot of the trust that they had been working hard over the course of the year to build. Classroom policies, on the other hand, are operating from a different assumption, which is to treat students as people capable of reasoning, growth, making ethical choices if they're given space to think through it. There's a logic there in that these teachers know students better and over a longer period of time, creating relationships than perhaps the central office does, and certainly the State House. Third, teachers understand that transparency serves learning, not just accountability. So when Eric Cross asks students to disclose their AI use, he's not trying to catch them. He's trying to create a record that can spark a conversation. So when he says, tell me how you used it and why, he's looking to open thinking. If he says, I know you cheated, that's going to effectively close it. And they're very different moves, and he understands the difference. Fourth, teachers have learned that restriction drives behavior underground. The teachers who went with hard restrictions, essentially don't use AI, will tell you students use it anyway. It just gets hidden. And the teachers who build transparency policies are working from the opposite logic, which is to make it visible, make it part of the conversation so they have a chance to teach about it. And fifth, the policies are designed for integrity, not just compliance. I think that's an important distinction to highlight here, is that the teachers are not trying to stop AI use. They're trying to preserve what really matters: learning, voice, the authentic work, and the growth that the students are with over the course of the school year. That's a very different problem to solve. If there's one thing across these policies that are held in common, even the ones that are more restrictive, I would say is that teachers are designing for trust. It's not naive or blind, but it's with accountability. It's transparency above all. Trust that says, I believe you're capable of ethical reasoning, and here's how we're going to be honest with each other about it. What's happening in these classrooms, I think, is not that teachers have solved the AI problem, is they've decided to solve it together with students instead of fighting against them. The policies that we're reviewing here show us where the real work is. And I think it's not about creating that perfect rule. It's not about catching cheaters. It's about creating conditions where students understand why integrity matters and they can reason through their choices. So the questions I would leave you with is, what's your current policy? As a classroom teacher, as you're headed back to school, do you have a policy? What is it built on? Would you say it leans more towards restriction or transparency? How much is trust evident to your students in the way that the policy is written and the way that you've been executing it or the way you plan to execute it over the coming year? As always, I love your feedback on this. I'd love to know where you're coming from. Please share your thoughts in the comments. I read everything that you write. And as always, thanks for spending a little time with us today on AI in the Classroom Daily, and we'll see you again tomorrow.